Okay, we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order at 5:08. We'll forego the Pledge of Allegiance until tonight's council meeting. Roll call.
Ambrose?
Here.
Rochester?
Here.
Borba?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Public comments.
Pursuant to Government Code Section 54954.3, residents wishing to address the Audit and Finance Committee regarding only the items on the agenda may do so when the item is read for consideration. You may state your name and address for the record, however, it is not required. Please limit comments to 3 minutes or less. Under the provisions of the California Government Code, the Audit and Finance Committee may not discuss or take action on any item that is not in the agenda.
Are there any public comments? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close this and move on to the next item. Minutes for September 22, 2025 regular meeting. Staff recommends to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as listed.
Second.
Okay, motion by Borba, second by Rochester. Borba?
Yes.
Rochester?
Yes.
Ambrose?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Funding and budget matters. Treasurer's report unaudited for the month ending August 31, 2025. Are there any questions regarding the treasurer's report? No? Okay. I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve.
And I'll second.
Okay, motion by Ambrose, second by Rochester. Rochester?
Yes.
Ambrose?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Reports and presentations from staff. Go ahead and pass this on over to our finance director.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, committee, city staff, and Atwater community. My name is Anna Nicholas, your finance director for the city of Atwater. I am very pleased to bring this item forward for you this evening. I'm going to do a brief introduction, and then I'm going to turn over the mic time to Mr. Ahmed Badawi of Badawi and Associates. Subsequent to tonight's Audit and Finance Committee meeting is the City Council meeting, and included in that agenda packet is the full annual financial report for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2024, along with 2 other reports, the single audit report for year ended June 30th, 2024, and the independent auditor's report on agreed upon procedures applied to appropriations limit schedule for the year ended June 30th, 2025. The focus of the presentation for this meeting and for the council meeting will be on the first item, which is the annual financial report, informally referred to as the audit. While you'll often hear us use the word audit with a shine of drudgery, the audit truly should be given the recognition it deserves, as it's quite simply one of the most important documents that public agencies produce. While this is an annual routine item, it merits considerable attention, not only due to the complexity and volume of work invested both on the city side and the auditing firm side, but for the purpose this report exists, and that is to provide accurate financial data and supplementary information with the assurance of conformance to generally accepted accounting principles to all stakeholders of the city of Atwater. For readers of the report, some important items of the annual financial report that should not be overlooked are the independent auditor's report, which can be located on page 1 of the report, the letter of transmittal from the finance director and the city manager, which can be located on Roman numeral page 5 of the report, and a required and useful component of the annual financial report is the management discussion and analysis, or the MD&A, which accompanies the financial data of the report, and that can be located on page 5. And before turning it over, I want to express my sincere appreciation to the City of Atwater's finance team. In the audience with us is Randeep Atwal. He's our newest accountant for the City of Atwater. Not able to be with us is our accountant too, Jared Mua, who deserves a very special shout out for all of his work that he puts into this process. Our entire finance team contributes towards the success of producing this report. And then second, an expression of sincere appreciation for the professional expertise of Mr. Badawi's team, with special mention to Fatima Salman. And I'll turn it on over.
Well, good evening. My name is Ahmed Badawi. I was the audit partner on the City of Atwater audit, and today I'll present to you the results of the 2024 audit. Can I get started here? I'll let you know what I'm going to cover today. Sorry, try to look at the monitor. I memorize the presentation for the most part, but every now and then I may. But just to let you know what I'm going to cover today, I'll give you a brief overview of our firm and the engagement team. I'll let you know what were the deliverables and the scope of our audit. A brief overview of our audit methodology, areas of primary audit risk that we identified during our process, type of audit opinion we issued, provide you a summary of the numbers in the financial statements, provide you the required communications as your independent auditor, and then a brief overview of the new accounting standards coming your way. Start here by the firm, and this is just a snapshot of our firm. We have about 25 years of experience. We are a very specialized firm. We only work with government clients. We work with about 65 government clients. Out of those, we have about 44 cities that we currently audit. We have about 30 employees, and the only number that we like to keep very low is that last one, that so far we have 0 lawsuits and disciplinary actions against the firm. As far as our engagement team, there's a little bit of pointing the right direction. Sorry. So this was the composition of our engagement team. I was the engagement partner. We always have a quality control reviewer. This person is usually in the background reviewing our work, making sure that we adhere to professional standards, also provide a second review of the financial statements. We also have an IT specialist that their role is to evaluate the controls in the city's computer system, looking at backup procedures, cybersecurity, some of those matters. We also had an audit senior and 2 professional staff assigned to audit. I'm sorry? Yeah, I'm not sure if it's running out of battery or if it's, or I'm not. All right, so as far as the deliverables and the scope of our audit, we were mainly engaged to provide an opinion on the city's financial statements, the annual financial report, also the single audit report, that's the audit of the federal grant expenditures for the year, so that's a compliance audit. Agreed upon procedures on the GAN limit, the appropriation limit. We prepared the financial transaction reports for the city, Public Financing Authority, Fire Protection District. So those are normally done in January, so they were done in January of 25, and they are submission to the State Controller's Office, electronic submission about some of the financial transactions. Also, street report is similar. We provide that electronically to the State Controller's Office. And then finally, the communication with the governing body, which is what I'm doing today, and we also issue a letter summarizing that communication. As far as our audit methodology, this is really a very brief overview of our audit methodology. The audit is a process that is really done throughout the year. It starts with the planning phase, which will involve myself, the audit senior, sometimes management, where we gather information, see what are the major events and transactions that occurred during the year, staff turnover, just to help us plan the audit. Then we do our interim phase, or our risk assessment phase. And this phase focuses on evaluating the city's processes and controls. It involves conducting interviews with city staff, testing controls, doing walkthroughs of controls, and perform a risk assessment. The year-end phase is the validation phase of the audit. So after the year is over and the city closes books, we come in and we basically validate the account balances. The cities say we have this much in cash. We ask for bank statements, reconciliations, and so on to verify all the different account balances. And then finally, the reporting phase is the phase when we draft the financial statements. The city prepared the MD&A, and then we finalize the reports. That's in summary the audit methodology. As far as the primary audit risk areas, I always like to qualify that before I proceed, that any audit have some risks. There are no risk-free audits. Same like when you get on the freeway and you drive your car, there are some risks involved. So we identified some risks that are pretty typical in most of our audits. The first one is screen, the risk of management override of control. Management is the one normally responsible for designing internal control, for overseeing them, and they're usually in a position to override them. So we design audit procedures to mitigate that risk or at least reduce it to an acceptable level. So these are examples of some of the things that we do, make sure that we assign more experienced personnel to more complex areas of the audit, to incorporate an element of unpredictability in the audit process, to consider how management select accounting standards and apply them, review estimates made by management, test journal entries made by management, evaluate any unusual transactions, and evaluate also our fraud inquiries. Another area of risk is revenues and receivable. So this is by default an area of a higher risk. Auditing standards do require us to consider this area of a higher risk. So some of the examples of the things we do, we rely heavily on confirmations with third parties. So we do send confirmations to the county, to the state, to other granting agencies and major revenue sources, and we ask them to confirm amounts paid to the city. And we reconcile those to the city's accounting records. We also do testing of utility billing, we do ratio analysis, and a variety of other procedures to get comfortable with the records. And then finally, the last risk we identified are the estimates, accounting estimates. And accounting estimates are usually a risk because of the degree of uncertainty that it's involved in. Wanted to provide you some examples of the numbers that are estimated in your financial statements. So the fair value of your investments is an estimate. The useful life of capital assets, pension amounts are all based on actuarial assumptions and estimates, and same with the retiree medical benefits. As far as our auditor's report and the financial statements, so we issued our audit opinion. The audit opinion states the standards that we followed, and those are the generally accepted auditing standards and also government auditing standards. We have issued an unmodified opinion, and an unmodified opinion in simple terms means it's a clean opinion, and what it really means is that we believe that the financial statements are fairly stated in all material respects, that all estimates are reasonable, that all disclosures are properly reflected, and that all significant accounting policies have been consistently applied. So that's what an unmodified opinion means. On the next few slides, I'm going to provide you just a 30,000-foot view of the numbers in your financial statements. So on this slide here is a summary of the city's assets over the last 3 years. I have to say this year has been, for 2024, has been a fairly consistent year where there's little fluctuation in the numbers. As you can see, there's very minor fluctuations in the numbers. Two largest assets are cash and investments and capital assets, and that's pretty typical with most cities. That those are the two largest assets that we normally see. The next slide here is the liabilities over the last 3 years. And again, fairly consistent. The city is paying down its debt as scheduled, and otherwise really no major fluctuation in the numbers. The city's long-term debt are the bonds and loans and all of those other debt that are issued, and this is obviously the largest liability, followed by the pension liability. On this slide here is a summary of the city's equity over the last 3 years. So equity is the city's assets minus liabilities. And just wanted to highlight to you that we divide the equity into 3 categories. First one, the net investment in capital assets, which is the largest category. It's not in a spendable form. This is how much the city invested in streets and roads and buildings, minus any debt that was issued to acquire those. So obviously, unless you sell your streets and assets, this amount is really never going to become in a spendable format. Then you have the restricted amounts, and those have legal restrictions on them. So outside legal restriction, it can be granting agencies, it can be gas tax, it can be bond money, but it's not really under the city council's control. And then finally, the unrestricted amounts. Those are the amounts that are under the council control that have no legal restriction. And that's about $30 million. So that's just a breakdown of the city's equity over the last 3 years. Then if we look here, the net cost of service to tax revenues. So the net cost of service is the cost of the city running all its departments, minus any revenues that those departments bring in on their own. And the idea is to see, does the city have sufficient tax revenue to cover that net cost of service? As of 2024, the net cost of service was about 14 million, and the tax revenue was close to 21 million. So obviously, more than the cost of service. There was a big drop in 2023, and that usually happened when there was a big grant that basically offset a lot of the cost. ARPA, for example, was a very common grant in 2023 that would have offset that cost. Also, pension expense in 2023 were negative for most cities, so that would have reduced the net cost of service as well. If we were to just focus on the general fund, this slide here is looking at the unrestricted fund balance of the general fund and comparing it to annual expenditures. The idea is to see, in the very unlikely scenario that all revenue sources stop coming in, how long can the city continue to pay its bills just using its existing fund balance? And you can probably, you're probably already aware that the city have a very healthy general fund balance. You have about pretty much a year worth of expenditures sitting in your fund balance. That's definitely above average cities that we audit. I'm never going to say, oh, it's too much. It's obviously it's always a good thing to have healthy fund balance, but it's definitely above the average that we see. I always also caution my audience that we only look at the financial results as of a point in time, and sometimes, you know, fund balance may look really healthy, but there may be some deferred maintenance and other future costs that are to be paid from that. So we're always hesitant of saying, oh, this is a very strong financial position, because we're really only looking at a very short period of time. But at least as of the end of the year, fund balance was a very healthy fund balance. Wanted to highlight to you also that pension liability is an estimated number, and one of the most significant assumptions in estimating this number is what we call the discount rate. So wanted to highlight to you what the liability would look like if that discount rate is either increased or decreased by 1%. So currently your liability is that middle line, and currently the liability is around 29 million. This liability can fluctuate to 42 million if that discount rate is decreased, or it can go down to below 20 million if that discount rate is increased. Of course, we do not control that discount rate. That's CalPERS that makes those assumptions. I just wanted to highlight to you how sensitive the pension liability is to that discount rate. Similar to pension, OPEB also is an estimated number, and discount rate is also a significant assumption. Probably the impact is not as significant as pension, just due to the funded status of the OPEB plan versus the pension plan. The next part of my presentation are the required communications as your independent auditor. On this slide here, I'll summarize for you our responsibilities as the audit firm versus city management's responsibility. We are responsible to provide an opinion on whether the city's financial statements are free of material misstatement and are fairly stated. We're also responsible for evaluating internal control over financial reporting, for evaluating compliance with laws and regulations, ensuring financial statements are clear and transparent, communicate with the governing body. Management have a lot of responsibilities in this process. So management is responsible to take responsibility for the financials. Even though you hire our firm to audit the numbers and certify them, we only provide reasonable assurance, not absolute assurance, and our audit does not relieve management from its responsibility. Management is responsible to establish and maintain internal control over financial reporting, making all financial records available to us, establish internal control that will prevent and detect fraud, inform us of all known and suspected fraud, comply with laws and regulations, and then finally take corrective action on any audit findings. As far as our independence, it is solely our responsibility to maintain our independence. We adhere to professional standards issued by the California Board of Accountancy and the AICPA. We evaluate additional services that we offer the city to make sure that they don't impair our independence. Drafting the financial statements on behalf of the city would impair our independence if no safeguards are put in place. The safeguards that we put in place are having an independent reviewer who's not involved in the audit to provide a review of those financial statements, and also identifying somebody in the city with a suitable skill, knowledge, and experience to oversee our work and take responsibility for it. As far as timing of the audit, it was not within the time frame that was agreed to with the city. I mean, obviously, today is October 13th, 2025, and I'm presenting the 2024 audit. In the next few weeks, I'm going to start presenting the 2025 audits to most of my clients. So definitely, the city is behind as far as the audit and the timing, and financial information that is now about 16, 17 months old is probably not as useful. So definitely something that we want to see improve, and the city having more timely audits. As far as significant accounting policies and unusual transactions, so there was one new accounting standard that the city implemented during fiscal year 24, and that's GASB Statement 100. Pleased to say we encountered no difficulties during our audit. Obviously, there were delays, but difficulties meaning like we had no difficulties working with management, obtaining documentation when we asked for them, and so on. So from that aspect, we had no issues. As far as significant audit adjustments, there were adjustments and reclassifying entries, and management has posted all of those adjustments. Adjustments normally occur when, after management closes its books and provide us the records for auditing, we discover errors and that requires correction. We will then propose adjusting entries for the city to post and correct those errors. As far as deficiencies in internal controls, we had no material weaknesses identified, and those are the most severe. So at least that's the good news, that we had no material weaknesses, but we did have some significant deficiencies, and they are less severe than a material weakness. First one is the financial closing and audit preparedness. So again, it goes with the timing of the audit, that due to staffing and so on, the city was not ready on time for the audit, which led to the delay in finishing the audit. Also, I mentioned, in addition to that, also schedules provided by the city. So the city is making improvement, but in the past, the city used to rely on the auditor to maybe put some information together, and that's not really allowed for the auditor to be doing that. So the city's been making progress, but there are still certain schedules that we'd like to see the city putting together. So for example, in the past, the city would just print us reports from the fixed asset system and expect us to put the schedules together. In 2024, the city actually did put the schedules together, but for long-term debt, we're looking for the same. Where a schedule that summarizes to us, say, here's our opening balances, here are the new debt we issued, here are what we paid during the year, here's our ending outstanding debt, so we can use that as a lead schedule and start auditing that. Then finally, the city was subject to what we call the single audit, which is a compliance audit of the federal grants. And there was a finding there that any time the city used federal funds to hire a contractor, the city is responsible for verifying that this contractor is not suspended or debarred from doing business with the federal government. There are multiple ways of doing that, from going on a website that you can look up that vendor to see if they are listed as suspended or debarred, or having clause in the contract that requires self-certification from the vendor that they are not suspended or debarred. So those procedures were not done when the city hired contractors using federal funds. So those were the findings identified during 2024 audit. And just finally, a summary of the new accounting standards coming your way. So in 2025, we have a couple of new standards dealing with vacation and sick leave mostly, and how to account for them. And then also in 2026, there are a couple of new standards that are coming your way. Normally, we discuss those standards with management in detail. We also host an annual training seminar every year where we go into a lot of detail about those standards and how they should be implemented. That concludes my presentation. I want to say thank you for allowing us the opportunity, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee?
Hi, thank you very much for the report. I appreciate it. I did hear you say that a lot of cities keep a certain number of months on average for a fund balance, and that we were not significantly higher, but higher than other cities that you've audited. What is the average number of months that cities typically will keep in their fund balance?
Maybe I can talk about my clients because we don't really average all California cities. But I would say that for my clients, we see anywhere from 6 to 8 months on average. That's not necessarily because this is the policy and that's what but that's the best they can do. I mean, obviously, the more fund balance you have, the better. But I always say there are a point where if you have too much money in there, then one can start questioning, well, why are we collecting all these taxes and all this money if we're not spending it? But I would say majority of our clients fall into the 6 to 8 months. We have a few that are really on the low end and are like 2 and 3 months, and those are obviously we get a little bit more concerned about. And we have some that are significantly higher than what you have. We have some cities that have 2.5 years worth of fund balance in there. Every city is different. Sometimes cities may be accumulating funds, but then they are getting ready to spend on some projects. Sometimes some cities may have some deferred maintenance, so even though the fund balance looks big, but again, they're getting ready to spend down some funds. But I would say the average is 6 to 8.
I did have another question. I know that you had noted that the timing of our audit, that we were behind. When will you begin the 2025 audit?
So we haven't really talked about that yet because we just finished the 24, but our plan, we haven't discussed with management, but at least we marked our calendar that we would probably start sometime in December, the 2025 audit. I mean, obviously, we need to discuss with management, make sure it works with them and that they will be ready. But we're trying not to push it another year. And
Right, yeah,
try to catch
that makes
up.
sense. Okay, thank you very much.
All right, we have no further questions, so thank you very much for your presentation.
And I can piggyback onto what Ahmed said about the 25 audit. I mean, ideally, a city's goal should be to have it completed and forward to their governing body by the end of that. So like by the end of December 2025, and then finishing up that single audit very quickly around there. Single audit is due to the state May 31st of the year, so, I'm sorry, March 31st. So we know that we'll be a little bit behind again this year because that's just the domino effect of having to get 1 year done. And we know that there's a couple departments that are a little bit behind in their closing transactions. So we've started to do what we can, but yeah, it's going to be a behind, but let's hope that it's not as behind. Ideally, at latest we would want to have the audit and single audit done by March 31st, and that would be a great goal for Atwater. So that's what we'll strive for, and even if it's closely thereafter, it's way better than having it in the fall. So, yeah.
Okay. Moving on to the next item, Finance Director updates.
Okay, thank you again. I do have a few updates for you, and I'll try to keep it pretty brief, but a few things that I want to keep you apprised of in current financial items that you should be aware of as a committee. The sales tax for calendar year 2025 quarter 2 data is going to be available to us very soon. We'll have a meeting with our sales tax consultant to go over the information and to get any revenue estimates that might be made, and bring that information forward to you at our next meeting, hopefully. And any revenue estimates that might need to be made will be used for our 25-26 mid-year budget. The city manager and I have our annual meeting with our property tax consultants later this week. The finance department continues to struggle with short staffing and staffing stabilization, so we've made some improvements in some areas, but we're in transition periods in other areas. So the team's doing a phenomenal job at making sure that critical functions are getting done with trying to limit impact to customer service operations. But the reality is there's going to be some impacts, and so we're as we work to fill positions and train new hires and work to retain our team members. So we'll be as communicative as possible if there's any items that could impact customer service operations. And then this is finally something I never thought I would be reporting on in my almost 19-year career in municipal finance, and that is the end of the penny. Many of you know, and for information if you're not aware, that the U.S. Department of Treasury has decided to stop producing pennies in early 2026. And so according to the U.S. Mint, the unit cost for producing pennies is 3.69 cents per penny. It's a situation we've been monitoring through professional finance networks and recently received word from the city's bank, JP Chase, that orders are beginning to go unfilled by the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve's role for coin is limited to distribution, so the Mint is responsible for the coin production, and then the Federal Reserve moves the coins through distribution to banks and credit unions. And then in turn, those financial institutions distribute to their customers. So in this case, JP Chase fills our orders. So we prepare bank deposits, but then we also prepare currency orders so that we can make sure we have ample and diversified cash on hand to help our customers at the utility counter window. So with that, as the city's bank starts to have lesser of a supply, we'll be working on making sure that our customers are aware to either bring specific change, or there's always options to round up to the nearest nickel if needed. And so as we start to go through that, when supply no longer allows for our orders to be fulfilled, we'll probably make some noticing and keep you up to date on that. And if that topic is of interest to you, the Federal Reserve has set up a FAQ page, and then also the United States Mint annual report for 2024 actually has the cost of production for each coin, so that's available on there. And that report has an MD&A and an independent auditor's report in it, so you're going to know how to navigate around it. And with that, that's the end of my report. Happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for the finance director? No? Okay, thank you very much. And with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting at 5:40.